files related to the events of March 9th, 1997, begin not with the immediate incident at the intersection of Wilshire Boulevard and South Fairfax Avenue, but with a travel itinerary established weeks prior, according to records maintained by Bad Boy Entertainment. Christopher Wallace, known professionally as the Notorious B.I.G, arrived in Los Angeles, California, in early February 1997. The stated purpose of the trip was twofold: the filming of a music video for the track Hypnotize, and the promotion of his upcoming double album, Life After Death. However, intelligence reports compiled by the Los Angeles Police Department and later reviewed by federal agencies suggest that the context of this visit was heavily influenced by the volatile atmosphere permeating the music industry at the time. Investigative summaries indicate that the geopolitical landscape of hip-hop had fractured significantly over the preceding 24 months, following the loss of life involving Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas in September 1996. Tension between East Coast and West Coast factions had escalated from rhetorical disputes to tangible threats. Security logs from the period show that Mr. Wallace's management team was acutely aware of the risk profile. Upon arrival in California, the entourage employed a heavy security detail, including personal protection officers and off-duty law enforcement personnel. Yet, despite these precautions, the timeline reveals a series of logistical choices that placed the artist in a vulnerable position within a jurisdiction known to be hostile to his presence. Throughout February, Wallace and his team operated within a tight perimeter. Production schedules for the music video indicate long hours spent on closed sets, limiting public exposure. Interviews given during this period, preserved in radio archives, demonstrate Wallace's attempt to de-escalate the perceived rivalry. In a conversation broadcast on March 5th on a local San Francisco station, Wallace explicitly stated his desire to move past the conflict. However, police informants later noted that street-level intelligence in Los Angeles contradicted this diplomatic stance. Certain factions within the city reportedly viewed Wallace's presence not as a business trip, but as a territorial challenge. The timeline accelerates on March 8th, 1997. It was the night of the 11th Annual Soul Train Music Awards, held at the Shrine Auditorium. Footage from the broadcast captures Wallace presenting an award. The audience reaction was mixed, with audible disapproval recorded on the tape. Following the ceremony, the itinerary shifted to a private after-party hosted by Vibe magazine and Q West Records. The venue selected was the Peterson Automotive Museum, located at 6060 Wilshire Boulevard in the Miracle Mile district. Procedural errors regarding the organization of the event would later become a focal point of the investigation. The party was not a public event. Entry was restricted to a guest list. However, capacity logs indicate that the venue was significantly overcrowded. By midnight, the density of attendees inside the museum had violated municipal safety codes. This overcrowding necessitated the intervention of the Los Angeles Fire Department. According to the official incident report filed by the fire marshal, the decision was made to shut the event down early due to overcrowding. At 12:30 in the morning on March 9th, the lights in the venue were raised, and the announcement was made for all guests to exit. This administrative decision by the fire marshal is a critical juncture in the timeline. It forced hundreds of individuals, including high-profile figures and their security teams, onto the street simultaneously. Instead of a staggered, secure departure, the exit was chaotic. Witnesses interviewed by the Los Angeles Police Department described a flood of people pouring onto Wilshire Boulevard and Fairfax Avenue. In this uncontrolled environment, the carefully planned security perimeter around Wallace was subjected to the variables of a crowded public sidewalk. Photographic evidence captured during these minutes shows Wallace standing outside the museum, wearing a dark suit, appearing calm as he waited for his transport. At approximately 12:45 in the morning, Wallace and his entourage exited the museum. Surveillance of the parking area and witness statements allow for a precise reconstruction of the vehicle formation. The group utilized 3 vehicles for transport. The lead vehicle was a Chrysler Sebring convertible. The second vehicle was a dark green GMC Suburban. This was the primary transport for Mr. Wallace. The third vehicle in the convoy, trailing the Suburban, was a Chevrolet Blazer carrying the label's CEO, Sean Combs, and his security detail. According to the seating chart reconstructed by investigators, Wallace sat in the front passenger seat of the middle vehicle, the GMC Suburban. Driving the vehicle was Gregory Young. In the rear seats were 2 other associates, Damian Butler and Junior MAFIA member Lil Cease. The configuration of the passengers placed Wallace adjacent to the window, a factor that would become significant during the forensic reconstruction of the event. It is noted in the file that while Mr. Combs's vehicle was driven by a security professional trained in evasive driving, the vehicle carrying Wallace was driven by a friend rather than a licensed protection specialist. The convoy departed the parking structure of the Peterson Automotive Museum and turned right onto South Fairfax Avenue, intending to travel 50 yards to the intersection with Wilshire Boulevard. The plan was to return to their hotel, the Sheraton Grand in downtown Los Angeles. However, the sheer volume of pedestrian and vehicular traffic leaving the party created a bottleneck. At 12:45, the GMC Suburban carrying Wallace approached the intersection of Wilshire and Fairfax. The traffic light was red. The vehicle came to a complete stop in the middle lane. To the left of the Suburban, in the lane closest to the center divider, was the Chevrolet Blazer carrying the security team. Behind them was the vehicle carrying Mr. Combs. To the right of Wallace's vehicle was an open lane of traffic adjacent to the curb. According to traffic analysis and witness statements provided to investigators later, the lead vehicle, the Chrysler, successfully navigated through the intersection just as the signal shifted or proceeded before the light changed, creating a gap between it and the Suburban. The GMC Suburban remained stationary. It is at this precise moment that the timeline focuses on a specific unknown subject. Witnesses noted a dark-colored sedan, later identified by investigators as a late-model Chevrolet Impala SS, pulling up alongside the GMC Suburban on the right side. The vehicle had dark tinted windows, obscuring the interior. The unexpected arrival of this vehicle in the blind spot of the security team suggests a calculated approach. The lead security vehicle was positioned on the left, blocking that angle, but the right side of the Suburban remained exposed to the street. The driver of the Impala was described by witnesses as an African-American male wearing a blue suit and a bow tie. Though this description relies on witness testimony rather than video evidence, the mechanics of the subsequent moments were rapid. According to the ballistic analysis later conducted by the Scientific Investigation Division, the window of the Impala was lowered. An arm extended from the vehicle, a firearm identified through forensic analysis of the casings as a 9mm blue steel pistol, was discharged. 4 projectiles penetrated the passenger door of the GMC Suburban. The trajectory analysis confirmed that the rounds were fired at a slightly upward angle, consistent with a driver firing from a lower sedan into a higher SUV. Following the rapid succession of discharges, the dark Impala accelerated and turned right onto Wilshire Boulevard, heading east. The vehicle disappeared into the night traffic. The entire interaction at the intersection lasted less than 10 seconds. The reaction from the convoy was immediate. The driver of the Suburban, Gregory Young, realized the gravity of the situation. Instead of waiting for emergency medical services to arrive at the location, a decision that often results in lost minutes during a trauma event, the driver made the decision to transport Wallace directly to the hospital. The driver bypassed the red light, accelerated across Wilshire Boulevard, and made a U-turn to head toward the medical facility. The chaotic transit to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center took approximately 10 minutes. Upon arrival at the emergency bay, medical personnel initiated advanced life support protocols. Records from the emergency room indicate that the patient was unconscious and not breathing upon intake. A team of trauma surgeons performed an emergency thoracotomy in an attempt to stabilize the patient. This procedure involves opening the chest cavity to manually massage the heart and assess internal damage. However, the damage to vital organs was irreversible. At 1:15 in the morning, roughly 30 minutes after the convoy left the museum, Christopher Wallace was pronounced deceased. The investigation that launched in the minutes following the pronouncement was immediately beset by jurisdictional confusion and evidence degradation. Officers at the location of the incident on Wilshire Boulevard failed to secure the perimeter effectively in the initial aftermath. The crowds leaving the party contaminated the area, potentially displacing physical evidence. The dark Impala SS had vanished into the Lowe's Angels traffic, leaving no immediate trail for patrol units to follow. By sunrise on March 9th, the physical evidence had been collected. Crime scene technicians recovered 4 distinct shell casings from the pavement. Ballistic analysis later determined these were 9mm Gecko ammunition, a specific brand made in Germany. This detail became a cornerstone of the investigation, distinguishing this case from a random act of street violence. Investigators posited that the acquisition of such specific ammunition implied a level of premeditation and access to specialized supply chains. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives records indicated only 2 distributors in the United States stocked this specific type of metal-piercing round. One in New Jersey and one in California. The California distributor was located in San Dimas. This tangible link offered a narrow geographic lead. Yet records show that the follow-up on this distribution chain was delayed and ultimately yielded inconclusive results regarding the purchaser. The medical examiner's report, filed under case number 970-1709, details the physiological impact of the event and serves as the primary document of record for the physical reality of the case. The examination was conducted by Dr. Lisa Shannon. The documentation describes the trajectory of 4 separate projectiles. The first projectile struck the passenger door panel and subsequently impacted the individual's left forearm, traveling down into the wrist. The second projectile entered the back, missing all vital organs, and exited through the left shoulder. The third projectile struck the outer left thigh and exited through the inner thigh. The clinical analysis determined that these 3 impacts were not immediately life-threatening in isolation. However, the 4th projectile was the critical factor. according to the autopsy diagram. This round entered the right hip, perforated the colon, the liver, the heart, and the upper lobe of the left lung, finally coming to rest in the left shoulder area. The path of the bullet effectively severed vital connections required for systemic function. The trajectory analysis was crucial for investigators. The angle of entry suggested that the person responsible was positioned slightly behind the pillar of the Suburban's passenger door, firing low to high. This aligned with the witness accounts of the Chevrolet Impala, pulling up alongside the Suburban, but stopping slightly short of being flush with the front window. In the days that followed, the Los Angeles Police Department opened a formal inquiry. The case file grew to include thousands of pages of witness statements, informant tips, and ballistic reports. One of the primary evidentiary challenges noted by detectives was the lack of cooperation from witnesses. Despite the incident occurring in a highly public area with dozens of onlookers, the official reports contain very few actionable descriptions of the driver of the Impala, beyond the composite sketch of the man in the blue suit. The prevailing theory among investigators was that the silence was not a result of ignorance, but of fear and institutional affiliation. The context of the investigation also included a scrutiny of the law enforcement officers present at the party. It was noted in the personnel logs that several off-duty officers were working security for the event. This intersection of law enforcement and the music industry created a complex web of potential conflicts of interest. The investigation faced early structural challenges. Initial theories heavily favored a connection to the bicoastal friction between music labels, specifically focusing on the Southside Crips gang. However, the procedural focus shifted when Detective Russell Poole was assigned to the investigative division. Poole began to uncover overlaps between the Wallace case and a separate investigation into corruption within the Los Angeles Police Department, specifically the Rampart Division. According to Poole's case notes, a significant lead emerged involving a former police officer named David Mack. Mack was arrested in late 1997 for a bank robbery. During the subsequent search of Mack's property, investigators discovered a black 1995 Chevrolet Impala SS in his garage. This vehicle matched the description provided by witnesses at the intersection of Wilshire and Fairfax. Furthermore, a search of Mack's residence yielded boxes of 9mm Gecko ammunition, the same rare brand recovered from the Wallace autopsy. Additionally, a visitor log from the jail where Mack was held showed that the first person to visit him was an individual named Amir Mohammed. Poole noted that Mohammed fit the composite sketch of the driver in the bow tie. Despite these physical correlations, the department did not classify Mack as a primary suspect in the official public record at that time. Procedural friction became evident within the department. Poole argued that the investigation was being stifled to protect the department from liability regarding the actions of rogue officers. His reports suggested a theory involving off-duty officers acting as security for rival music executives, facilitating the incident. This theory was met with resistance from department leadership, who maintained that the evidence was circumstantial. The internal conflict resulted in Poole resigning from the department in 1999, citing an inability to pursue the investigation honestly. The investigation languished for years, categorized as a cold case. It was not until 2002, during a civil liability lawsuit filed by the Wallace family against the city of Los Angeles, that the extent of the procedural failures became a matter of court record. The suit alleged that the city had covered up police involvement in the death. During the discovery phase of the trial in 2005, a significant procedural error by the city was exposed. Attorneys for the Wallace family located a tip sheet in the files of a detective that detailed a conversation with a jailhouse informant who claimed to know the identity of the perpetrator. This document had never been turned over to the plaintiffs, a violation of legal discovery rules. This failure to disclose evidence led the judge to declare a mistrial, noting that the city had failed in its obligation to provide full disclosure. In 2006, the investigation was reinvigorated under a new task force led by Detective Greg Kading. This phase of the inquiry moved away from the rogue officer theory and pivoted back toward a gang-related motive. Kading's team relied heavily on a confession from a woman named Teresa Swan, who implicated a definitive associate of the gang element. However, this confession was obtained under a proffer agreement, granting immunity, which meant the statement could not be used to prosecute the individual named unless corroborating physical evidence was found. Kading's investigation focused on a suspect named Wardell Faust, also known as Poochie. The task force analyzed unredacted documents and conducted new interviews. Investigators attempted to corroborate a financial trail, alleging that a check for $25,000 had been cashed shortly after the incident as payment for the act. They located records of a transaction aligning with the timeline. However, the doctrine of evidence requires a living subject for prosecution. Wardell Faust had lost his life in a separate incident in July of 2003. With the primary suspect deceased, the district attorney's office could not proceed with an indictment. The task force was effectively disbanded, and the findings were placed into the cold case archives. Federal Bureau of Investigation files, released years later with heavy redactions, indicate that federal agents had conducted their own parallel surveillance from 2003 to 2005. These files corroborate the presence of individuals with police connections in the vicinity of the Peterson Museum. On the night of the incident, the Bureau records note that specific individuals were observed at the party prior to the departure of the convoy. Despite this, the federal inquiry closed without issuing indictments, citing a lack of prosecutorial evidence to meet the burden of proof for federal civil rights charges. The official status of the case remains open and unsolved. The procedural history is defined not by a lack of leads, but by a surplus of conflicting narratives and a failure to integrate the ballistics evidence with the suspect profiles in a timely manner. The gecko ammunition remains the most distinct physical fact of the case. Its rarity provided a direct line to a limited number of purchasers. Yet the window to utilize that information closed as records at the point of sale were purged or lost over time. The vehicle Wallace was traveling in, the GMC Suburban, was repaired and returned to the rental agency shortly after the forensic examination, destroying any potential for secondary analysis as technology improved. To date, no individual has been charged with the fatal incident. The investigation serves as a case study in jurisdictional paralysis, where internal department protective measures and the chaotic nature of the initial crime scene processing degraded the ability to build a case beyond a reasonable doubt. The composite sketch of the man in the blue suit remains in the file, unmatched to any booked suspect, and the Chevrolet Impala found in the garage of the former officer was never definitively forensically linked to the intersection due to the passage of time before it was processed. The records stand as a testament to a fractured inquiry, where the doctrine of evidence was overshadowed by institutional complexity.